All right. Well, just as a young lad growing up, was there a defining moment when you discovered your singing voice?
I always used to like to sing. I think in primary school I was one of those annoying kids who whenever we had singing would be, proud as punch and just, I don't know, I was just really glued to the radio. I remember driving to and from school and just being able to remember the lyrics and the melodies of songs that were coming through on commercial stations at the time. And that got me into singing a lot. My grandmother bought me a piano accordion at the age of 10, so that's where the musical theory came into play. I just always enjoyed singing.
Yeah. So when did the prime focus instrumentally go from accordion to guitar? Do you remember your first guitar?
I do remember having a guitar teacher who was a guitar playing play in my teens, and we had a friend who was incredible. He used to play at the local pub and managed to sneak in underage. And one summer, he was showing me some songs, and then he loaned me a Beatles songbook, and that really helped, and really enjoyed it. I mean, that was one of those incredible books where it had the chord chart above the list, so it was really easy to play and sing at the same time. And I guess that kind of was my grounding in terms of being able to play guitar and sing simultaneously, which hadn't happened probably until then.
Talk about the early days in Perth and forming Chad's Tree with your brother. Was there a blueprint for the sound you wanted for that band?
I think there was. There was a couple of things that a few seminal bands that we loved and focused on, and that was the Velvet Underground, Television, and the Doors. That's all we seemed to be interested in. And then there was a few contemporaries. So we loved the Go-Betweens, we loved the Triffids, and we were interested in the Birthday Party and the Laughing Clowns. So throw that into the mix, and if you listen to some early recordings we did, it's incredible how I can hear those influences so clearly. Later on, they're not so apparent, but our first step into a studio and the influences are just so evident and are really strong. And I enjoy that probably more than anything else we did when we became more accomplished musicians. I'm not sure why, but it just seemed to be who we were, sort of an honest unveiling of what our influences were. And I really enjoyed listening to that now more than the later music that we created and recorded.
So, some wonderful bands came out of Perth during that time. Was it as vibrant a scene as we're led to believe?
I think my memory is more like you'd see the same people at gigs that you'd seen the weekend before. So it was a pretty small but loyal scene, and we're all just trying to find our way. Late teens, early 20s, making new friends, having the same likes and dislikes, and the independent scene was always small. There was a huge cover band scene that dominated the suburbs and to some extent the inner city, and only be a handful of venues you could go to see original music. And we used to go to one place over and over and over again and see whoever was playing. So that was a place called the Cat and Fiddle in Beaufort Street in Mount Lawley. And I just remember going there incessantly. And it was such a mishmash of sort of indie culture in there. You'd see skinheads, you'd see punks, you'd see, a rockabilly guy, some mods, and it was kind of a bit British. That we all read the ME, and I guess that's where the Triffids really sort of stood out. You could sense that they were listening to New York. You could sense they were listening to Talking Heads and television, Richard Hell and the Voidoids. Those influences were apparent to me, and that's what intrigued me about them the first time I saw them, and them as well at the Canton Fiddle.
One of the very first radio interviews I ever did was with David Mccombe. It was around the time of the release of the All Souls Alive album, and he expressed to me how much he loved at that time taking a back seat vocally and letting you take the reins because, in his words, you were a real singer. Was he instrumental in you developing a confidence in yourself as a vocalist? Absolutely.
Dave was the guy who said, okay, enough of this bedroom singing and taking the back seat in Chad's Tree. Let's get you centre stage and sing some songs. So when the Triffids had come out for one of their holidays after a European tour, Dave was staying at my place in Erskineville in Sydney. And at this point, I was doing a lot of strumming and singing in my bedroom, and God knows what I was doing, really, maybe trying to write some songs. And he heard me and said, look, we should do like a holiday band. It would be really good fun. We're here for like 6 weeks. We don't really have a tour in place. Let's do something different. And he got me involved in a project with Marty and Andy and himself, and we called ourselves the Bottomless Schooners of Old, and Graham Lee was involved as well. And he then decided, I'm going to go back to Perth. You guys sort it out. So it was up to us to, have a couple of rehearsals and get it as tight as we possibly could. And then Dave came back and we shared the vocals. And I think he really, as you said, enjoyed having less pressure on him and having other people sing his songs. I remember this time he asked me to sing when they were in Sydney promoting Callanshire, and it was on a TV program hosted by Clive Robertson called News World. And he just wanted to have another voice. He just never was super confident about his voice. He was one of these guys, like all of us, who can't stand listening to themselves sing. I mean, as soon as a record's done, it's done. It's nice to hear it every now and again, but I certainly don't go back and listen to myself. It's excruciating. All you hear is the flaws. And I'm sure that's what Dave heard as well. We all hear what's wrong with something, not what's good about it. So he encouraged me, and especially in the Blackeyed Susans, he was gifting me songs that were strong, like Ocean of You, a lot of songs from All Souls Alive, and then, Phil, of course, writing songs for me to sing. Phil's never been comfortable with singing. So I was in a lucky position not being a songwriter at that stage and having these great guys to work with.
Can you pinpoint a time when it started to become more than just a part-time holiday band, if it began to get more serious?
In terms of our level of success, I mean, it was never, let's, give up our day jobs and we can, tour the country and tour Europe and so forth and make a living out of this. It just never fell into place like that. We were always struggling to have people stay with the group. We'd always loan people from other bands, and there's been such a depth of great Australian musicians who've been involved in the Blackeyed Susans, guys from the Cruel Sea, the Dirty Three, the Jackson Code, the Triffids. So, when we made All Souls Alive, there wasn't actually a band left to tour it. It was insane. And I remember our manager who came on board said, I think, so how many shows have you done for this record? And we've gone about 8 or 10, and she was thinking, this is ridiculous. You've got an album out, you've got to tour. And she put together a tour, Warren Ellis, Phil Koukoulas, myself, in era with a double bass, dangling between the two front seats and over the gearbox, and drove up through Dubbo to Brisbane and then down through Sydney and Canberra and, you know, played a series of shows because you just thought, you got to do something. And shortly after that, I think Dave went overseas with the Red Ponies. So he had his solo record to think about, Love of Will. He wasn't wanting to play to too many people because he wanted people to come to his own shows, obviously. So, boy, it was such a dissatisfying time in a lot of ways. We'd made what we thought was a great record, and there was no one around to play as the Susans, really. So we struggled. We struggled, and then things just crumbled around us. I think the Dirty Three had started playing by that point and were also playing with Text on Charlie, and Dave was kind of struggling with his solo projects, and Phil and I were kind of left by ourselves wondering, well, how we were living in a share house together, and we'd started writing, and how are we going to start this band again, and can we keep the name, and should we, and, you know, those complicated questions one asks when things are falling apart around you. And I guess we were sort of arrogant enough to think, well, you know, we are two of the founding members of this band. It's more than anyone else, so let's continue with the name and see what happens. And that's when we found Kiernan Box, and he became part of the Blackeyed Susans trio, and we built up from there, getting Dan Luscombe and Mark Johnson, who was playing with Ed Cooper at the time, as his drummer. So that was the second Melbourne lineup.
The Wikipedia page for Blackeyed Susans has 24 members listed as members of the band at some point, enough for a footy team. Do you think that the floating nature of the band over the years has been a significant factor in its longevity?
Probably, as well as being an incredibly frustrating factor as well. I think because it's been considered a part-time band, that's certainly helped in its longevity, the fact that we weren't touring incessantly, which is what you're supposed to do. I think that definitely, and the fact that everyone was allowed to do whatever they wanted, it wasn't like their first priority. We're maybe in about 96, 97, we kind of knuckled down a bit, and we had records that were released in America through Frontier, and then American Recordings, Rick Rubin's label, and that's when we got to, you know, play in New York with Johnny Cash and Co and stuff. It was a big deal for us. We knuckled down, and we had a record that was Triple J Album of the Week, and we were in the Hot 100 there for a while, and had a presence. It felt like we were touring a lot with Paul Kelly and doing our own shows, and that was probably the height of our success around sort of 96, 97 with Spin the Bottle and Smoking Johnny Cash and Blue Skies, Blue Sea.
And we come to this year, which is 30 years of the Blackeyed Susans, anniversary this year. What does that mean to you?
It's meant an incredibly anxious and frustrating time, simply because I've released a solo record, and I wasn't really aware that the 30th anniversary was something we were going to celebrate until I was on the cusp of releasing this record, and I had tour dates in place, so it put me in a really awkward and quite a vulnerable position where I kind of had to say, I'm not available for this part of the year. Let's see what happens afterwards. And unfortunately, it just ended up stopping us in our tracks, and we haven't done anything about it. So there's no celebration. In fact, we're not even doing our annual Christmas shows this year. We're just having a break and just seeing what will unfold next year.
So was there a specific moment in time when you felt the timing was right for you to start recording solo?
Yeah, I think I started writing songs that I'm not sure the Susans would be particularly interested in. They just seemed like my songs. Mm-hmm. And firstly, I made a record with Dan Luscombe called There Is Nothing Here That Belongs to You, which he since told me should have been my solo record. I wish he'd told me that many years ago. And Wounded Bird, similarly. Look, there's always going to be a couple of songs I think could work with the Susans, but I just felt maybe they were a bit more sort of personal, and therefore didn't need a full band to perform them. And I also wanted, I guess, a bit more control in the studio. Didn't want the sort of democracy that comes with playing in a band, and wanted less personnel around. So if you had a wonky idea that was a bit left of field, there wouldn't be any judgmental comments. Yeah, I don't know. It's a funny dynamic when you have so many strong personalities and gifted musicians around. It can be not as easy as we all would like to think.
Do you think your on-stage persona has changed much through the years, particularly in more recent times when you've been out there as a solo act?
I think I'm much more comfortable having performed solo and put myself out and, played the occasional sort of acoustic house concert and been in really intimate surroundings. And I think also the fact that I've written the songs and I'm closer to them, it's easier to sort of open a discussion about them, or introduce a song knowing exactly where it's come from. Whereas if you sing other people's songs, much as we might sort of discuss them, it's almost like, well, that's sort of what I want to say in the song. Don't need to talk about it too much, and off I go and I sing it. And sometimes I'm left feeling like maybe I'm not the guy for this job. I feel so dissatisfied that I can't get into someone else's song as much as I can get into my own, and that's only natural. But there's certainly a sense of inadequacy, or gee, I wish Phil could sing this. There's been a couple of occasions where I've just gone, no, I'm not doing this. You have to sing it. It's just so you, Phil, do it. And he's done it, and he can sing. He's just one of those guys who's not interested in being a singer, a front guy. So he's always needed someone to sing those songs.
I guess for you as a songwriter, performing solo and acoustic, it's a great way to see how your songs connect with the listeners, because they're all stripped down. They're basically left to stand and fall on their own merits.
Well, that's true, and especially with this last record, because the songs have come out of conversation, and I've been drawn towards the narrative. So if you can follow a song to the end, if you can stay with me, which isn't easy to do, they're quite wordy and lengthy, some of them, I think you can sort of get it. I'm finding songs that aren't in that form these days less satisfying. To me, it's just like a jumble of words with a melody. What is this? It doesn't mean anything to me. I want things to mean something to me the older I get. I just don't want words and a melody and some fine music. I want to know exactly what's at the core of this lyric. And I think that's where I've come to as a singer and as a writer. I don't want this wishy-washy, interpret it as you want. I want to know exactly what it is about. So that's been interesting, and I think that's come from, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I was talked into writing a book not so long ago, and I think that changed my approach to writing in general. So that has affected how I write songs. So interesting.
You did put out that book. I guess you call it a memoir, but I believe it wasn't initially intended to be in book form.
Well, not really. I never intended to write a book, never. And what had happened was I'd written a couple of things for What's My Scene, and it was about the jobs that I've done to maintain life as a musician. And then I wrote something about the reels as I was performing with them. And I put it up on social media. Someone saw it. It's one of those strange stories that actually comes true. Someone saw it, said, "You should send this to this publisher. They're going to love it, and see what happens." And that stroking of the ego encouraged me to do exactly that. And they came back with, "Well, how many of these chapters have you got?" And I said, "Well, that's stage 4 or 5. And they said, "Well, great. Come back to us when you've got 70. So I had the strangest relationship with the editor there, because I had no idea how a book is supposed to be written. And because it's such it's done in solitude, you want some encouragement and some pats on the back as you go. So I'd be sending her 2 chapters at a time, and she, and I didn't know this until the end, but that was driving her crazy. So that's how I wrote my book. It was on my iPhone, on a train, in a hotel room, on a plane, on my way to work, on my way back from work, writing, editing, and then bang, I'd send and see what she came back with. But, it was a great thing to do. It was the most stressful release of my life, because I left a lot there on the table for people to see and know about me. And I thought, is this normal? Should I be doing this? But no, I'm glad I did it. There's talk of another one. In fact, the last time I saw her, she said, "It's time for another book." And I just thought, "Oh my God, please." Trying to kill me?
I guess in a similar vein, the Low Fidelity album you put out a couple of years ago, that wasn't initially intended to be an album either. It seems to be a recurring theme with you. Things seem to happen organically without serious planning. Is that your preferred way to work?
I think look, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think as soon as you start to consider things too much or overanalyze, they can kind of unravel and sound a little too structured or pristine, or something that's... I do... Don't get me wrong, I kind of like flaws in things. There's something about seeing the person through their flaws, maybe. So Low Fidelity was like that. I never intended to release it. You're exactly right. It was a collection of songs that people had suggested. This is the other good thing. I take no responsibility for the songs on that record, because they were suggested by other people for me to sing. So friends and fans of my music suggested these songs for me to record, and I recorded them all on my iPhone, sent them back to them. It was a part of a pledge campaign, crowdfunding, and after a while, after compiling about 40 of them, I was listening to them back, and I thought there was something really kind of relaxed and honest about the way that the songs were delivered. There's something that happens to you in the studio. You can kind of, well, for me anyway, it's almost like I kind of freeze the fact that this is going to be on a CD forever. Does strange things to one's confidence and ability to sing in a more kind of relaxed way. But there was something with these that I thought was, kind of joyful and interesting, and I sent them to Shane O'Mara, and he essentially lapped it up and coloured this palette with his guitar, and we had a great time doing that, because he couldn't record anything in high fidelity either. It had to be, the same way I'd recorded my vocal and guitar, and not get in the way too much. So it was fun to have that released for sure.
As you mentioned, you still maintain regular day jobs away from music. Do you find that helpful in terms of just allowing you time to just have a complete release from the music side of things?
Yeah, look, I'm not one of these people that can, I don't know, maybe if I made more money and, I could do it, but sometimes I just feel that I'm not one of those guys. I need to from music and get a bit more balance in my life. So, I'm happy to juggle a couple of things and music. I'm not one to do a 9-to-5 job. It's just never been me. So I do part-time here, casual there, music on the weekends. And that's how I function. I'm fairly happy with the way things work in that respect.
So what's as you mentioned, the Blackeyed Susans are in hiatus at the moment. So solo-wise, what's coming up for you?
Well, I'm heading up to Darwin for some solo shows for Sparrow and Swan, and I'm performing at the Palais Theatre with a whole bunch of people for the Sacred Heart Mission later this month. And I've also got a residency in solo duo mode at the Post Office Hotel in Coburg in November, Sundays in November. And that's, finishing off the tour for Sparrow and Swan and just giving it a little bit more sort of longevity. As I said, the whole sort of Susan's 30th year kind of interrupted what may or may not have happened. So I just want to play those songs more and see that through. So, yeah, I've got a couple of folk festivals, would you believe. I'm going down to Tassie to play at Signet and across to Perth in April to play the Fairbridge Folk Festival as well with Shane O'Mara.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Excellent. I believe there's also an album of lost David Mccombe songs about to be released. Are you involved in that at all?
I have been involved in that. And there were songs that Rob Mccombe and Graham Lee had put to one side and thought they should be re-recorded, or maybe early Triffid songs that they thought were worthy as well. So I've been involved in singing 3 or 4 of those songs. Yeah.
Brilliant.
And that's sounding great. There's people like Romy from Romy Vega Band, Alex Gow from Oh Mercy, Simon Breed from the UK, Angie Hart from Frente. So there's a few people singing. JP Shiloh, who's just released a solo record, he sings a couple of songs on there as well.
Are there any plans at all to take that album on stage at any point?
I haven't been in discussions with those guys for a while, but I assume so. I assume we'll have a launch of some sort, whether it's viable to tour it, given the personnel that would be involved. I'm not sure, but I can envisage a launch in Melbourne and maybe Sydney, but I guess we'll see what happens. They were talking of maybe releasing it in November, December. So fingers crossed that happens, or it might even coincide with a film that's being made about David Mccombe, that Jonathan Alley has been putting together for several years. So
yeah, that's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
It has been a long time coming. I'm sure it's frustrating for everyone involved, as well as people who've been waiting for it to come out. I don't know the story behind it in terms of why it's taken so long or what the hiccup is, but yeah, I mean, far out that they started shooting when Triffids were doing the Sydney Festival, which I was involved in, and that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, how long can you shape or polish it or make it perfect before you just have to kind of let go? It's so hard to make that decision.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll be worth a wait when it does get out there. Hey, Rob, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you. Congratulations on an outstanding career to date, and plenty more to come, I'm sure.
Cheers, John. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take
Pleasure.
care. All the best.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.